The crisp mountain air nipped at old Mr. Henderson's nose as he trudged toward the isolated cabin. He was the caretaker, responsible for ensuring the property remained secure and well-maintained during the off-season. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, an anomaly that sent a shiver of unease down his spine. The owners hadn't informed him of any visitors. He quickened his pace, his boots crunching on the frosted leaves that carpeted the ground. As he approached, he noticed the front door was slightly ajar, a more blatant sign that something was amiss. He pushed it open cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence echoed back, punctuated only by the crackling of a fire in the hearth. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the familiar space. Everything seemed in order, except for the unnaturally bright fire blazing in the fireplace. It was far too large for a simple cabin warming. He moved closer, intending to dampen the flames, when he noticed something amidst the burning logs and embers. It was a piece of paper, partially consumed by the fire, yet still retaining some semblance of its original form. Curiosity piqued, Mr. Henderson carefully used the fireplace tongs to extract the charred fragment. The paper was brittle and blackened around the edges, but he could still make out some words. They were scrawled in a hurried hand, hinting at a confession, a story of deceit and betrayal. The words spoke of a con, a victim, and a substantial amount of money. The implications were immediately clear: this wasn't just a cozy fire, it was an attempt to destroy evidence. A cold dread washed over Mr. Henderson. He knew he had to contact the authorities immediately. This wasn't just a simple case of trespassing, it was something far more sinister. He carefully placed the fragment in a plastic bag he always carried for collecting trash and hurried outside to his truck, his mind racing with questions and a growing sense of unease. He reached for his cell phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the number for the local police department. The tranquility of the mountain cabin had been shattered, replaced by the unsettling feeling that he had stumbled upon a dark secret. The distant wail of sirens sliced through the mountain air, growing louder as the police car sped down the winding road toward the isolated cabin. Deputy Miller, a young officer eager to prove himself, was the first to arrive, followed closely by Detective Harding, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail. Mr. Henderson, visibly shaken, met them at the door, recounting his discovery of the burned letter. "I haven't touched anything else," he assured them, his voice trembling slightly. "Just the letter fragment, like I told the dispatcher." Detective Harding nodded, his gaze sweeping over the cabin's interior. He instructed Deputy Miller to secure the perimeter while he examined the scene. The fireplace was the focal point, the charred remains of the fire still smoldering. He knelt down, carefully observing the ashes and the surrounding area. "Looks like someone tried to make sure this didn't get read," Harding muttered, gesturing towards the burned paper fragment. He pulled out a pair of gloves and carefully took the plastic bag from Mr. Henderson. He examined the fragment closely, noting the hurried handwriting and the partially legible words. "Definitely a confession of some kind," he said, his brow furrowed. "But to what exactly?" He turned his attention to the rest of the cabin, searching for any other clues that might shed light on the situation. He checked drawers, cabinets, and even under the furniture, but found nothing of immediate significance. The cabin was neat and tidy, as if someone had taken great care to erase any trace of their presence. Deputy Miller returned, reporting that there were no signs of forced entry and no other vehicles in the vicinity. "Whoever was here knew what they were doing," Miller observed. Harding nodded in agreement. This wasn't some random act of vandalism. This was calculated. He turned back to the fireplace, his eyes narrowing. "Let's get this fragment back to the lab. See if they can recover any more of the writing. And run a search on missing persons and fraud cases in the area. See if anything matches the details we have." He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. This little piece of burned paper could be the key to unlocking a whole lot of trouble. He knew in his gut that this was more than just a simple case of arson, it was the beginning of a complex investigation that would lead them down a winding path of deceit and betrayal. Back at the precinct, the lab technicians worked diligently on the charred fragment. Using specialized equipment, they managed to enhance the remaining text, revealing a few crucial phrases that had been obscured by the fire. Detective Harding watched with bated breath as the words slowly materialized on the screen. "We've got a partial name. Sarah. And something about a donation," the technician announced, pointing to the screen. "And here. It looks like Helping Hands. Maybe a charity name?" Harding leaned closer, his mind racing. Helping Hands. Run that through the database. See if there's any registered charity with that name. While the technician ran the search, Harding reread the enhanced text. The confession was fragmented, but the overall picture was becoming clearer. It spoke of deceiving a woman named Sarah, convincing her to donate a large sum of money to a fake charity called Helping Hands, and then disappearing with the funds. It was a classic con, preying on the kindness and generosity of others. The technician turned back to Harding, shaking his head. Nothing registered under Helping Hands in this state, or any surrounding states for that matter. It's either a very new charity, or more likely, completely bogus. Bogus it is, Harding confirmed, a grim expression on his face. This confirms our suspicions. We're dealing with a con artist, and this Sarah is his victim. He paused, tapping his pen against the desk. We need to find this Sarah. She's the key to identifying our con man. He instructed Deputy Miller to pull up all recent reports of fraud or scams targeting elderly women in the area. Focus on anything involving charities or donations, he instructed. And let's put out a call to local news stations. See if anyone recognizes the name Helping Hands or has been approached by someone soliciting donations for a similar cause. Harding knew that time was of the essence. The con artist could be long gone, or worse, he could be out there right now, preying on another unsuspecting victim. They needed to act quickly and decisively to bring him to justice and prevent further harm. The burned confession letter was their starting point, and they would follow its trail wherever it led, until they caught the person responsible for this heartless deception. Flashback. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Sarah's cozy home, illuminating the delicate china figurines that lined her shelves. Sarah, a kind-hearted woman in her late 60s, was known throughout the neighborhood for her generosity and willingness to help others. She volunteered at the local soup kitchen, knitted blankets for the homeless shelter, and always had a warm smile and a kind word for everyone she met. One afternoon, as she was tending to her rose bushes, a charming man approached her gate. He was well-dressed, with a disarming smile and a confident demeanor. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said, extending his hand. "My name is Mark, and I'm with Helping Hands. We're a non-profit organization dedicated to providing support and resources for underprivileged children in the community." Sarah, always eager to support a worthy cause, invited him in for tea. Mark regaled her with stories of the children Helping Hands was assisting, painting a vivid picture of their struggles and the organization's efforts to improve their lives. He spoke with passion and conviction, his words carefully chosen to tug at Sarah's heartstrings. He explained that they were currently running a fundraising campaign to build a new after-school center, where the children could receive tutoring, meals, and a safe place to play. He presented Sarah with a glossy brochure filled with heartwarming photos of smiling children. Sarah was deeply moved by Mark's presentation. She had always believed in the importance of helping those less fortunate, and she saw this as an opportunity to make a real difference in the lives of these children. Without hesitation, she wrote a check for a substantial amount, a significant portion of her savings. Mark accepted the check with profuse gratitude, showering Sarah with praise for her generosity and compassion. He promised to keep her updated on the progress of the after-school center and assured her that her donation would have a profound impact on the lives of countless children. As he left, Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction, believing that she had done something truly meaningful. Little did she know, she had just become the victim of a master manipulator, a wolf in sheep's clothing who had expertly played on her kindness and empathy. Flashback continues. Mark, with Sarah's generous check safely tucked away, wasted no time in putting his plan into action. He drove straight to the bank, cashing the check and transferring the funds to an untraceable offshore account. The money was now his, free from any potential scrutiny. He celebrated his success with a lavish dinner at an expensive restaurant, ordering the finest wines and indulging in decadent desserts. He reveled in the feeling of power and control, knowing that he had once again successfully manipulated someone into giving him what he wanted. Over the next few weeks, Mark lived a life of luxury, using Sarah's money to fund his extravagant lifestyle. He bought a new sports car, designer clothes, and a luxurious condo overlooking the city. He frequented high-end casinos, gambling away large sums of money with reckless abandon. He avoided any contact with Sarah, ignoring her calls and letters. He knew that the longer he stayed away, the less likely it was that she would suspect anything was amiss. He had perfected the art of disappearing, leaving no trace behind. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah began to grow concerned. She had not received any updates on the after-school center, and Mark had become increasingly difficult to reach. She tried calling the Helping Hands office, but the phone number was disconnected. A gnawing feeling of unease began to creep into her mind. She started to suspect that something was wrong, that she had been taken advantage of. She confided in her neighbor, Mrs. Davis, who had always been skeptical of Mark and his charity. Mrs. Davis encouraged Sarah to report the incident to the police, but Sarah was hesitant. She was embarrassed and ashamed that she had been so easily deceived. She feared that she would be seen as foolish and gullible. However, Mrs. Davis persisted, reminding her that Mark could be preying on other vulnerable people. Finally, Sarah agreed, knowing that it was the right thing to do, even if it meant facing the humiliation of admitting her mistake. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Sarah's world, once filled with trust and goodwill, began to crumble around her. The joy she felt in donating was now replaced with a heavy heart and a sense of betrayal. Back to the present. Detective Harding sat across from Sarah in her living room, the same living room where she had so warmly welcomed Mark months ago. The china figurines still lined the shelves, but the sunlight seemed less bright, the atmosphere heavy with sadness and regret. Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed, her face etched with worry. "Mrs. Peterson, I understand this is difficult, but any information you can provide could be crucial in helping us catch this man," Harding said gently, offering her a cup of tea. Sarah took a shaky sip, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I feel so foolish," she whispered. "I can't believe I was so easily taken in." "These con artists are very skilled at what they do," Harding reassured her. "They know how to manipulate people's emotions and exploit their trust. You shouldn't blame yourself." He showed her the enhanced image of the burned letter fragment. "Does the name Helping Hand sound familiar to you?" Sarah's eyes widened. "That's the name of the charity Mark said he was with. He told me they were building an after-school center for underprivileged children." Harding nodded. "We've determined that Helping Hands is not a registered charity. It appears to be completely fabricated." He then asked Sarah to describe Mark in as much detail as possible. She provided a thorough description of his appearance, his mannerisms, and the things he had said to her. She also remembered that he had mentioned a specific town where the after-school center was supposedly being built. "He said it was in Oakhaven, about an hour's drive from here," Sarah recalled. "He even showed me pictures of the land where they were planning to build it." Harding's eyes lit up. "Oakhaven. That's a start. We'll check with the local authorities there to see if they have any record of Helping Hands or any similar construction projects." He thanked Sarah for her cooperation and assured her that they were doing everything they could to bring Mark to justice. As he left, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Sarah. She was a kind and generous woman who had been cruelly betrayed. He was determined to catch Mark and make him pay for the pain and suffering he had caused. He knew this case would be personal. Detective Harding returned to the precinct, his mind buzzing with the information Sarah had provided. He immediately contacted the Oakhaven Police Department, relaying the details of the Helping Hands scam and requesting their assistance in searching for any related activity. Meanwhile, Deputy Miller was sifting through reports of fraud and scams, looking for any cases that matched Sarah's description of Mark. He found several reports of similar cons, but none that perfectly aligned with the helping hands scheme. However, one report caught his eye. It was from a woman in a neighboring town who claimed she had been approached by a man soliciting donations for a different charity, but his description closely matched Sarah's description of Mark. Miller showed the report to Harding. "This could be our guy," he said. "He's using different charities, but the MO is the same." Harding examined the report, his brow furrowed. "This gives us something else to work with. Let's expand our search to include all neighboring towns and cities. See if we can find any other reports of similar scams." He also instructed the department's sketch artist to create a composite image of Mark based on Sarah's description. He wanted to get the image out to the public as soon as possible, hoping that someone would recognize him and provide information that could lead to his arrest. As the investigation progressed, Harding felt a growing sense of urgency. He knew that Mark was a dangerous predator who was preying on the vulnerable and exploiting their trust. He was determined to stop him before he could cause any more harm. He reviewed the details of the burned letter again, searching for any overlooked clues that might help them narrow down their search. The letter mentioned a specific date, a week before it was burned. Harding thought perhaps something significant happened that day, something that prompted Mark to write the confession and then attempt to destroy it. He assigned Miller to investigate Mark's whereabouts and activities around that date. Maybe there was a witness, a transaction, something that could help them find him. The clock was ticking, and Harding knew they were in a race against time. Every moment that Mark remained free was another opportunity for him to deceive and defraud innocent people. The next morning, the composite sketch of Mark was plastered across local news websites and television broadcasts. Detective Harding hoped that the widespread publicity would generate some leads, but he also knew that Mark could be long gone, having fled the area with Sarah's money. Meanwhile, Deputy Miller's investigation into Mark's activities around the date mentioned in the burned letter was yielding some promising results. He discovered that Mark had rented a cabin in the mountains a few weeks prior and had checked out abruptly on the day in question, leaving the cabin in a state of disarray. "It looks like he was in a hurry to leave," Miller reported to Harding. The caretaker said there was evidence of a fire in the fireplace, and some papers had been burned. Harding's eyes widened. "That's it. That's when he tried to destroy the confession letter." He realized that something must have spooked Mark, prompting him to write the confession and then attempt to cover his tracks. He instructed Miller to interview the cabin caretaker, Mr. Henderson, to see if he had noticed anything unusual about Mark's behavior or if he had seen anyone else visiting the cabin. As Miller conducted the interview, Harding received a call from the Oakhaven Police Department. They had checked their records and found no evidence of any construction projects related to helping hands. However, they had received a report from a local business owner who claimed that he had been approached by a man matching Mark's description, soliciting donations for a different charity. He was very persistent, the business owner told the Oakhaven police. "He kept pressuring me to donate a large sum of money, and he became very aggressive when I refused." Harding realized that Mark was becoming bolder and more desperate. He was taking greater risks, and it was only a matter of time before he made a mistake that would lead to his capture. He felt a surge of determination. He knew they were closing in on him, and he wouldn't let him slip away. Based on the business owner's report in Oakhaven, Harding decided to concentrate their search in that area. He knew Mark was likely still in the vicinity, preying on unsuspecting victims. He dispatched several officers to Oakhaven, instructing them to canvass the area, showing Mark's composite sketch to local businesses and residents. Meanwhile, Harding reviewed all the information they had gathered so far, searching for any patterns or connections that might help them predict Mark's next move. He knew that con artists often followed a predictable pattern, targeting vulnerable individuals and exploiting their weaknesses. He realized that Mark was likely targeting elderly women who were living alone and had a history of charitable giving. He instructed his officers to focus their search on neighborhoods with a high concentration of elderly residents. As the officers canvassed Oakhaven, one of them spotted a man matching Mark's description entering a local community center. The officer immediately radioed for backup and discreetly followed Mark inside. Inside the community center, Mark was engaging in conversation with a group of elderly women, charming them with his charisma and flattery. He was telling them about a new charity he was representing, one that provided assistance to veterans and their families. The officer watched as Mark began to solicit donations from the women, his voice filled with sincerity and compassion. He knew that Mark was about to strike again, preying on the kindness and generosity of these vulnerable individuals. As Mark reached into his pocket to retrieve a donation form, the officer signaled to his backup, who quickly moved into position. They surrounded Mark, preventing him from escaping. "Mark, you're under arrest," the officer announced, his voice firm and authoritative. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud and theft." Mark's face turned pale as he realized that his game was up. He knew that he had been caught, and there was no way out. He surrendered peacefully, his days of deception and manipulation finally coming to an end. The elderly women looked on in shock and disbelief, realizing that they had almost become victims of a heartless con artist. They were grateful for the quick action of the police, who had arrived just in time to prevent them from being scammed. Flashback. Weeks after conning Sarah, Mark, flush with cash, decided to invest in a few things he'd always wanted, things that would truly reflect the successful image he craved. He started with a sleek, cherry-red sports car, the kind that turned heads and announced his arrival wherever he went. He took it for a spin, wind whipping through his hair, a wide grin plastered across his face. "This is the life," he muttered to himself, feeling invincible. Next came the wardrobe upgrade. He tossed out his old, worn clothes and replaced them with designer suits, expensive shoes, and silk ties. He preened in front of the mirror, admiring his transformation. He looked the part now, the part of a wealthy philanthropist, the kind of person people trusted implicitly. But the real indulgence was the penthouse apartment he rented overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views, and the interior was decorated with modern furniture and abstract art. He threw lavish parties, inviting people he barely knew, eager to bask in their admiration and envy. He told them stories of his success, embellishing the truth and painting himself as a self-made millionaire. He even started dating a beautiful woman named Emily, showering her with expensive gifts and taking her on romantic getaways. He pretended to be someone he wasn't, someone worthy of her affection. However, beneath the surface of his glamorous life, a sense of unease began to gnaw at him. He knew that his wealth was built on lies and deception, and he feared that his past would eventually catch up to him. He started drinking heavily, trying to numb the guilt and anxiety that plagued him. He became paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, afraid that someone would expose his true identity. One night, after a particularly heavy drinking session, he sat down and began to write a confession, pouring out his guilt and remorse onto the page. He described his scam in detail, naming Sarah as his victim and admitting to his crimes. But as he finished writing, he panicked. He couldn't let anyone see this, he realized. It would ruin everything. He crumpled up the letter and threw it into the fireplace, watching as the flames consumed his words. But the fire wasn't hot enough, and the letter wasn't completely destroyed, leaving behind the charred fragment that would eventually lead to his downfall. The guilt that he felt, even as he burned the letter, would haunt him. Back to the present. With Mark in custody, Detective Harding focused on recovering the stolen money. He knew that Mark had likely stashed it away in a secure location, hoping to use it once the heat had died down. He questioned Mark extensively, but Mark refused to cooperate, denying any involvement in the Helping Hands scam. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mark insisted, his voice filled with feigned innocence. "I've never heard of Helping Hands or any of these people you're accusing me of scamming." Harding knew that Mark was lying, but he needed concrete evidence to prove it. He obtained a search warrant for Mark's penthouse apartment and dispatched a team of officers to conduct a thorough search. The officers meticulously searched every room, examining every drawer, closet, and container. They found expensive clothes, jewelry, and other luxury items, but they found no trace of the stolen money. Just when they were about to give up, one of the officers noticed a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. He pried it open and discovered a hidden compartment containing a large sum of cash, neatly bundled and wrapped in plastic. Harding was elated. They had found the money. He immediately informed Sarah, who was overjoyed to hear the news. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I never thought I would see that money again." Harding cautioned her that they had only recovered a portion of the stolen funds. Mark had likely spent a significant amount on his lavish lifestyle. However, he assured her that they would do everything they could to recover the remaining money. He also informed her that Mark would be charged with multiple counts of fraud, theft, and forgery. He would face a lengthy prison sentence for his crimes. As Harding hung up the phone, he felt a sense of satisfaction. He had brought a heartless con artist to justice and recovered at least some of the money he had stolen from an innocent victim. But he also knew that there were countless other con artists out there, preying on the vulnerable and exploiting their trust. He resolved to continue fighting against these criminals, protecting the innocent and ensuring that justice was served. The courtroom was packed as Mark's trial began. Sarah sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on the man who had so cruelly betrayed her trust. She felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and a sense of vindication. She was determined to see justice served. The prosecution presented a strong case against Mark, highlighting the evidence they had gathered, including the burned confession letter, Sarah's testimony, and the recovered money. They painted a picture of Mark as a cold and calculating con artist who had preyed on the vulnerable for his own selfish gain. Mark's defense attorney argued that there was no direct evidence linking Mark to the Helping Hands scam. He claimed that Sarah had simply made a bad investment and that Mark was being unfairly targeted. However, the jury was not convinced. After deliberating for several hours, they returned a guilty verdict on all counts. Mark was convicted of fraud, theft, and forgery. The judge sentenced Mark to a lengthy prison sentence, ordering him to pay restitution to Sarah for the money he had stolen. As Mark was led away in handcuffs, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had finally gotten justice. She knew that the money could never fully compensate her for the emotional distress she had suffered, but it was a start. After the trial, Sarah received an outpouring of support from her community. Her neighbors organized a fundraiser to help her recover her financial losses, and she received countless letters and cards from people who had been touched by her story. Sarah decided to use her experience to help others avoid becoming victims of con artists. She volunteered at local senior centers, giving presentations on how to recognize and avoid scams. She also became an advocate for consumer protection laws, working to strengthen the legal protections for vulnerable individuals. Sarah's experience had been painful, but it had also made her stronger and more resilient. She had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of being cautious and skeptical, but she had also reaffirmed her belief in the inherent goodness of people. She knew that there were still good people in the world, people who were willing to help others and fight for what is right. She was determined to be one of those people, making a positive difference in the world, one act of kindness at a time. Her spirit, though tested, was not broken. The following text is an alternate version of the capture, ignoring all key points after September 17. As the officers spread out across Oakhaven, one patrol car, driven by Officer Davies, cruised slowly through a residential neighborhood known for its elderly population. Davies kept a close eye out for anyone resembling the composite sketch of Mark. He passed several people, but none matched the description. Then, as he rounded a corner, he spotted a man standing on the porch of a small, well-kept house, talking to an elderly woman. Davies slowed down, his heart pounding in his chest. The man's height, build, and even the way he held himself matched the sketch perfectly. Davies parked his car a short distance away, positioning it so he could observe the scene without being noticed. He watched as the man spoke to the woman, his voice low and persuasive. The woman, who appeared to be in her late 70s, listened intently, her eyes wide with interest. Davies could see that the man was holding a clipboard and a stack of glossy brochures. He recognized the telltale signs of a con artist at work. He radioed for backup, informing dispatch of his location and requesting immediate assistance. He continued to observe the scene, his tension mounting. He watched as the man presented the woman with a donation form and a pen. The woman hesitated for a moment, then reached for the pen. Davies knew he had to act fast. He couldn't let this woman become another victim. He jumped out of his car and ran towards the house, shouting, "Police! Stop what you're doing!" Mark, startled by the sudden outburst, turned around, his eyes widening in alarm. He recognized Davies as a police officer and knew that his game was up. He shoved the clipboard and brochures into his briefcase and turned to flee. "Stop! Don't move!" Davies shouted, drawing his weapon. Mark ignored his commands and sprinted off the porch, running towards the back of the house. Davies gave chase, his adrenaline pumping. He knew that he had to catch this con artist before he could escape and potentially harm someone else. The chase was on. Mark scrambled over a low fence, his briefcase bouncing against his side. He cut through the elderly woman's backyard, ignoring her startled gasp as he trampled her prize-winning rose bushes. He could hear Officer Davies gaining on him, his heavy footsteps pounding the pavement. He burst out of the backyard and onto a quiet residential street, hoping to lose Davies in the maze of houses and gardens. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Davies emerged from the backyard seconds later, his eyes scanning the street. He spotted Mark running towards a row of parked cars. He raised his voice, shouting, "Stop! Police! You are under arrest!" Mark weaved through the parked cars, dodging oncoming traffic. He reached a busy intersection and darted across the street against the light, narrowly avoiding being hit by a speeding car. Davies followed close behind, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see that Mark was tiring, his pace slowing. He knew that he was about to catch him. Suddenly, Mark veered sharply to the right, disappearing into a narrow alleyway. Davies followed him into the alley, his gun drawn. The alleyway was dark and narrow, filled with overflowing trash cans and discarded boxes. Mark stumbled over a pile of garbage, falling to the ground. Davies quickly closed the distance, pinning Mark to the ground. "You're under arrest," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Davies recited Mark's rights, backup officers arrived on the scene, sirens wailing. They quickly secured Mark and transported him to the local police station. The chase was over. Mark, the con artist who had preyed on the vulnerable, had finally been brought to justice. The neighborhood, momentarily disrupted by the chase, slowly returned to its peaceful calm. The elderly woman whose garden had been trampled watched as the police took Mark away, a mixture of relief and anger on her face. She knew that she had been lucky to avoid becoming another victim of his scams. After Mark was secured at the police station, Officer Davies turned his attention to the briefcase Mark had been carrying. He carefully opened it, revealing a stack of glossy brochures, donation forms, and a small amount of cash. Davies counted the money. It was only a few $100s, far less than what Sarah had lost. He suspected that Mark had stashed the bulk of the stolen funds elsewhere. He contacted Detective Harding, informing him of Mark's arrest and the contents of the briefcase. Harding instructed Davies to bring Mark and the evidence back to the precinct for further questioning. Back at the precinct, Harding interrogated Mark, but Mark remained tight-lipped, refusing to confess to the helping hands scam or reveal the location of the stolen money. "I told you, I don't know what you're talking about," Mark insisted, his voice defiant. "I'm just a businessman trying to make a living." Harding knew that Mark was lying, but he needed more evidence to break him. He ordered a thorough search of Mark's car and personal belongings, hoping to find something that would incriminate him. The search yielded nothing of significance, except for a crumpled receipt from a storage facility located on the outskirts of town. Harding's eyes lit up. He suspected that Mark might be using the storage unit to hide the stolen money. He obtained a search warrant for the storage unit and dispatched a team of officers to investigate. The officers arrived at the storage facility and located Mark's unit. They carefully unlocked the door and stepped inside. The unit was sparsely furnished, containing only a few boxes and a locked metal cabinet. The officers pried open the cabinet and discovered a large sum of cash, neatly bundled and wrapped in plastic. Harding was ecstatic. They had found the stolen money. He immediately informed Sarah, who was overjoyed to hear the news. While it was not the entire sum she had lost, a significant portion was recovered. With Mark in custody and the stolen money recovered, Harding felt a sense of closure. He had brought a heartless con artist to justice and helped an innocent victim reclaim her financial security. He knew that there were still other cons being perpetrated, but he also knew that the police were there to protect the vulnerable and uphold the law. Detective Harding, recognizing Sarah's need for closure, arranged for her to have a brief, supervised meeting with Mark before his trial. He cautioned her against expecting an apology or any sign of remorse. He explained it was solely for her benefit, to allow her to voice her feelings and perhaps begin to heal. The meeting took place in a small, sterile room at the county jail. Sarah sat across from Mark, a thick plexiglass barrier separating them. Mark looked disheveled and defeated, his once charming demeanor replaced by a sullen, hardened expression. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "Mark," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't understand how you could do this. How could you take advantage of my kindness and generosity?" Mark avoided her gaze, his eyes fixed on the floor. He remained silent, offering no explanation or apology. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "I trusted you. I believed in what you were doing. I thought I was helping children in need. But you lied to me. You stole my money and my trust." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I worked hard for that money. I saved it for my retirement. And you took it all away. You not only hurt me financially, but you also broke my heart." She leaned closer to the plexiglass, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. "I don't hate you, Mark. But I am deeply disappointed in you. I thought you were a good person, but I was wrong. You're nothing but a thief and a liar." Mark finally looked up, his eyes meeting Sarah's. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. "I did what I had to do," he muttered, his voice cold and emotionless. "It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. You can't trust anyone." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "That's not true," she said. "There are still good people in the world. People who care about others and do what is right. You're just not one of them." She stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "I hope you rot in jail, Mark. You deserve everything you get." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Mark alone with his guilt and regret. As she left the jail, Sarah felt a sense of catharsis. She had finally confronted her betrayer and voiced her feelings. She knew that it wouldn't erase the pain and suffering she had endured, but it was a step in the right direction. She was ready to move on with her life and rebuild her future. The anger she felt started to slowly fade away, replaced by a determination to start anew. Mark's trial was swift. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he offered no credible defense. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to a significant prison term. Justice had finally been served. Sarah, though still bearing the emotional scars of the experience, began the slow process of healing. The support from her community was invaluable. Her neighbors rallied around her, offering friendship, encouragement, and practical assistance. The recovered portion of her money, while not enough to fully restore her savings, provided a much-needed financial cushion. She learned to be more cautious and skeptical, but she refused to let the experience harden her heart. She continued to volunteer at the soup kitchen and knit blankets for the homeless shelter, finding solace and purpose in helping others. She also became a vocal advocate for fraud prevention, sharing her story with community groups and senior centers, warning others about the dangers of con artists. Detective Harding kept in touch with Sarah, checking in on her periodically and providing updates on Mark's incarceration. He admired her resilience and her determination to turn a negative experience into a positive one. One day, Harding received a letter from Sarah, thanking him for his help and support. She wrote that she had finally forgiven Mark, not for his sake, but for her own. She realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only poison her own life. She concluded the letter by saying that she was now focused on the future, determined to live each day to the fullest and make a positive difference in the world. Harding smiled as he read the letter, knowing that Sarah had truly triumphed over adversity. The case of the burned confession letter had come to a close, but its impact would continue to resonate. It served as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. And it showed that even in the face of betrayal and loss, the human spirit can endure and ultimately prevail. Sarah's journey from victim to survivor was an inspiration to all who knew her, a testament to the power of hope, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human heart. The warmth of her kindness, though dimmed for a time, shone brightly once more.